Hi, my name is Chris Channon, and I appreciate you giving me the privilege to share my testimony with you. I promise you, by the end of our time here today, you will understand why I am so humbled and grateful to God for giving me the ability to share with you my story. Just over 8 years ago, I was hired by a Christian humanitarian relief organization called Samaritan's Purse to work in South Sudan in their operations department. After finishing my work in South Sudan and the Philippines, I decided that I would take a break from my job and follow my dream to travel and explore. I found myself on a remote island off the southwest coast of Thailand called Koh Lipe. It was a true paradise. I had originally planned to stay for only 2 days, but as fate would have it, I decided to stay for 5. On the morning of August 14th, 2014, the third day, I went to the local ATM to withdraw a large amount of cash for an upcoming diving excursion. I remember having this eerie feeling that I was being watched as I withdrew my money. I quickly brushed it off and continued on with my business. I spent the rest of the day enjoying the sun, sand, and surf, and living the good life. As I entered into an unlit section of the beach, I was accosted by a local man who appeared to be drunk. He reached out to grab my wallet. My last memory was that of trying to push him away, and after that, everything went dark. I opened my eyes. I remember thinking how beautiful the stars looked. I tried to get up, but nothing happened. As hard as I tried, my legs and arms would not respond. Stabbing pain shot through my lower back. I knew I was close to the edge of the water. I could hear the surf as it hit the shore, and then I remembered the tide. Was it coming in or going out? Sheer terror and panic gripped me as I envisioned the water getting closer and drowning me. I prayed and screamed out for what seemed like hours, and yet no one heard me. My voice went silent with exhaustion. As I lay there, I thought of my family, my children, my friends, my future. Literally, my life passed before my eyes. I cried and I begged God to rescue me. Then my nightmare truly began. As the surf receded, the crabs came, along with the mosquitoes and fire ants. For hours they feasted on me. The agony was almost unbearable. I lay there unable to move, wishing I would just die. And then in that still, small quiet of the night, I heard a voice. I've shared this before with doctors, therapists, social workers, and they all sort of agreed that I was probably delusional from the pain. And you know what? Perhaps so to them. But I know better. The voice said as clear as I'm speaking to you now, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And then I must have passed out, because the next thing I remember was waking up to someone shouting at me. A couple from New Zealand, taking a mid-morning stroll on the beach, spotted me and came to investigate. I was delirious with pain and exhaustion, yet I managed to beg them for help. The husband went for help while his wife managed to pour a few drops of water into my mouth. I clearly remember being so grateful for this act of kindness. I now can empathize with the victim in the story of the Good Samaritan. The local police officers showed up to investigate, speaking only Thai and understanding no English. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they placed me on a sheet of plywood and, balancing me on the sidecar of their motorcycle, they took me to the local clinic. The nurses on duty had no idea what to do with me. They placed me on a cold steel table and did their best to comfort me. I looked at the clock. It was 12 noon. The local police thought it would be a great time to interrogate me, and I was questioned for over 2 hours, even though I had no idea what they were saying. The decision was made to send me to the mainland. A local fisherman was hired, and 4 hours later I was carried to the boat. As I was being loaded, I was dropped. I believe it was the first time in my life that I have ever passed out from pain. It took well over an hour to reach the mainland. The waves were treacherous, and every bump I thought I would die. When we arrived, I was loaded into the bed of an old pickup truck and taken to the city hospital in Pakbara. The doctors did their best at trying to assess what was wrong with me. I was sent for x-rays, and the technicians placed me roughly on the table. They took several dozen x-rays while twisting and bending my body the entire time. The pain was agonizing. Afterward, I was informed that the x-rays didn't work and that they would have to redo them all again. It was then decided to send me to a bigger hospital, and I was loaded into an old ambulance and taken to the city of Hat Yai. Upon arrival, I was quickly assessed, and for the first time, a C-collar was placed around my neck. After receiving both an MRI and CT scan, it was determined that my C4 vertebrae had been shattered, and my C5 and 6 were compressed together. I was sent immediately for emergency surgery. It just so happened that a top neurosurgeon from Berkeley, California, was on a speaking tour of Thailand, and it just so happened, right, that he was at the hospital that day delivering a lecture. While I've never met him, I was told that he scrubbed in and helped in my surgery. And a few days later, the doctors came to see me and told me that with my level of injury, it was very unlikely that I would ever walk again. But several hours later, the nurses came in and I was propped up in my bed, and for the first time, I was able to wiggle my big toe. I cried like a baby and thanked God for this clear message that I was not alone and that He truly was with me. And after 4 weeks, I was finally well enough to travel home to Toronto. I was immediately taken to Sunnybrook, where I spent 8 days, and then I was admitted to the Toronto Rehab Lyndhurst Centre for 16 weeks of rehab. I was labeled a C4 incomplete quadriplegic with central cord syndrome. On January 15, 2015, I walked out of the hospital and finally went home. As tough as my rehab was, going home was by far the toughest battle I had ever faced. Going through the stages of grief, as well as dealing with the loss of dignity, invasion of personal space, loss of control, loneliness, and pity were just a few of the battles I dealt with. Like the children of Israel, I wandered in the wilderness for over 2 years of my life, being so angry at God and asking Him every day, why? But through God's amazing grace and faithfulness, and also keeping His promise that He would never leave me nor forsake me, I soon learned once again to depend on Him and seek His face for direction in my life. The Lord has allowed me to serve in my community with a spinal cord mentoring group and partner with local hospital teaching patient rights and values. The Lord gave me the ability to participate in the Toronto Scotiabank 5-kilometer walk 2 years ago, where I was able to share my story with the local media. He then gave me the opportunity to go back to work at Samaritan's Purse to help minister to the less fortunate. And now for the greatest blessing of all. God gave me a beautiful, godly wife and 2 adorable children. Each one of us are on our own journey, and God has a plan for us, even though at times it may be so hard to understand. I'm praying today that by sharing with you a small portion of God's amazing grace and faithfulness in my life, I can encourage you to keep trusting in God's faithfulness and say with the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, that all things do work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to His purpose.